It's given me, and I know who I am. We are a chosen generation. We've been called for to show His excellence. All I require for life, God has given me. For I know who I am. I know who God says I am. What He says.
Blessed Wednesday morning to all listeners locked on to Hope 103.1 FM.
I know who God says I am. What He says I am. Where He says I am.
It's another beautiful Wednesday on the Isle of Spice.
I'm working in power. I'm working miracles. I live a life of favor. For I know who I am. I'm working in power.
Today we are here to start another
Life of favor.
informative session in Leadership Plus. We thank God for the initiative taken by Reverend John Lewis. He has been adding so much value to the lives of all the listeners. I myself have been learning quite a lot, yeah?
We are a chosen generation. We've been called for to show His excellence.
Blessed morning to you, Reverend John. How are you today?
Good morning. It's good to be with you. It's a beautiful day here in the Isle of Spice, where everything is nice.
Definitely. Have you been able to catch any of the meetings from the CO2 in Glasgow?
Oh, yes. Everybody, I believe, was following those important discussions about climate resilience and changes. I know our own Trevor is there, and he'll bring back all the reports, I'm sure.
Yes. As we continue our chat today on leadership, we're looking at delegating. And we, in our session, after reading the text in question for today, I recognize that, Jesus is wise. He chose 12 men and he trained them for 3 years, knowing that he would have given them tasks, that was soon coming. And he did not depend on his own efforts to spread news about the kingdom of God. Could you enlighten us or further enlighten us on today's topic?
Well, I'm glad you raised that first point, that in those days, we probably didn't call it a theological institute, but it was actually a 3-year program of intense training. And that's where he started out, training and equipping his own disciples. So it's a great model. We see that also in the life of Daniel, where these men were in a training program as well, leadership development program for 3 years. And that's what is so critical about training and developing leaders. And we're now able to delegate tasks to leaders who are being developed. And so that's a great starting point for our discussion today, that unless people are being trained, and of course they had the best trainer, Jesus Christ himself, and modeled for them, and he lived among them. And so they saw not only what he taught, but they saw how he lived and how they had these practical lessons on leadership. And when they did not pass a particular course, they had to repeat it. I remember he was talking one time to them about having faith, and then immediately after the story on faith, he took them across the seas and was trying to test their knowledge of how they had grown in faith, only to realize that they panicked when they experienced the storm. And so they were actually practical sessions, having taught them, and that's one principle we learned, how we equipped our leaders, not only by just the rote memory, as it were, and literary materials, but also my practical experiences. So today, we're going to look at the life of one of those leaders in the Old Testament, of course, as well, Moses. Subtitle of our discussion, of course, taken from the John Maxwell training program. The day Moses became a leader, and that text is taken from Exodus chapter 18, 17 to 27, just in case you want to follow in the text. So we're going to look at 7 changes Moses made to become a leader. First and foremost, he became a man of prayer. Now listen to me, I'll give you counsel, and God be with you. You will be the people's representative before God, and you bring their disputes before God. So he started out like Nehemiah, also another great leader in the Old Testament. He became a man of prayer, and that's the location of our power, and having a connection and intimacy with God, who gives us all wisdom to lead. And then he committed himself to communication. Then teach them the statutes and the laws, and make known to them the way in which they are to walk and the work they are to do. So we have to communicate clearly the vision, the mission, the purpose for which God has called them to, and communicate that to the followers. And how do we equip those who follow us and those who are leaders in themselves? So prayer, he committed himself to communicating the vision, and then he laid out the vision. Then teach them the statutes of the Lord, and make known to them the way in which they are to walk and the way they are to do. So make the vision clear, write it down, make it plain. Unless people understand clearly the vision which we are seeking to cast, they get muddled and lose direction in terms of not having a laid out, clearly expounded vision, and well communicated as well. And then fourthly, he developed a plan. So that he taught them the statutes and then the work. This is the plan. So there's a strategic planning of how not only casting the vision, but how we strategize to execute the plan. And then, of course, he did a couple important things as well. He selected and trained the leaders. He selected them out of all walks of life. As you know, the disciples came from all different backgrounds, all different experiences. And so they selected a team of men and walked with them. And he released them to serve based on their gifts. We talked about that, about understanding our giftings, the giftedness with which we are born, but also the acquired skills, experiences, and training that we have received up to this point in our lives. So release them to serve after they had received their training. And he only did what they could not do. So here, as an exemplary leader, you delegate tasks to your team, to those who are involved in your organization, in your church. You give them responsibilities. They execute their gifts and talents in the areas of responsibilities. And as a leader, you basically do not take back those responsibilities from them, but you only do what perhaps they as understudies are not able to do. If you will do this thing and God commands you, then you will be able to endure, and all the people also will go in their place in peace. So those are 7 guides that we can follow as an example of how Moses demonstrated his leadership.
Yes, Moses is one of my favorite characters, and he really had to pray and do as you have pointed out in those points to be an effective leader. And could you continue on letting
Sure.
us know, because yes, he
Yes.
took his father-in-law advice, which is
Mhm.
called the Jethro Principle, and these, as
Yes.
well as you have outlined, tells us some of the steps he take to be that effective leader. Could you continue?
Sure. So he took his advice of his father-in-law, as you mentioned, and then um, he demonstrated this by the task of being a minister. So we want to make a differentiation, though, between what is considered to be a minister and a leader. For example, a minister serves people, um, a leader serves people as well. A minister directly meets the needs of people, and a leader empowers others to meet the needs of people. It draws fulfillment from doing the work, draws fulfillment from equipping others to do the work. Plays defense to survive, plays offense to make progress, reacts to the needs that arise from moment to
Mhm.
moment, creates opportunities to mentor others, focus on immediate needs, focus on long term vision, shepherds others, equips others. So there's some varying distinctions there. But we want to look at perhaps why some leaders, pastors, may fail to develop people. One, they realize that equipping people is hard work. Uh, and that's definitely true from our own experiences in training and developing leaders. This is not an overnight activity or investment in people. It's a long term. It's a long haul. 3 years is not, holiday, but it's a long term commitment. In this case of Moses, case of Jesus, of course. And so sometimes we back away from the hard work and the commitment that it takes to equip others, so we may give up on the task. As you know, that Moses had some difficult people to deal with as well. And very often, as leaders, we will encounter those kinds of people and different personalities. And sometimes we struggle with our own insecurities. We talked about that last time, how we understand our own securities, and that may prevent us from moving forward and helping others. We are not confident in our own leadership um, application and development. We are not secure um, in how we ought to develop others. They feel like they're the only one that is qualified. Now, that is where pride comes in, and we think that we alone have all the answers. Um, and then they don't trust others. Trust is an important factor to everything in life. And so you have to trust the people that you're leading, that you're delegating, that you're equipping. If we do not trust them, we will not invest in them. Sometimes we have bad habits of an unbiblical perspective. We we are not um, pure in our motives for what we do sometimes. So we have to assess our motivation for why we are doing what we are doing. Um, they do not believe strongly in people's ability to learn. And sometimes, sad but true, we don't know how to train. Unless we have received training ourselves, unless we have been exposed to training, and we possibly would not be able to train. Um, and the challenge comes when we're not only training followers, because that's the easy part, but when we are training leaders, leaders who would question, who would challenge, and sometimes even try to intimidate you in what you're seeking to do. So those are some of the challenges
Mhm.
why sometimes people um, run away, as it were, from the responsibility of equipping and leading others. So developing others will take energy, time, and careful planning. It is a proactive way of leading rather than a reactive way of leading. And sometimes we do the latter. We react to circumstances and situations that has happened rather than thinking ahead, planning and designing a program of training for your leaders, rather than try to solve problems when they arise. So being proactive is critical. And so there's some question for reflection. Do you find it difficult to keep other people and delegate tasks? Question for us to think about. How difficult it is for us to equip others and to delegate. And we have to be careful as leaders that we don't try to do everything by ourselves, because there could be a perfectionist attitude that if it is not done by me, it is not done thoroughly, properly. But that's where we allow people to make mistakes. That's where we invest in their development, because of course, when we were being trained or owning our developmental training, of course, we did make mistakes. In what areas could release control and equip someone to lead? So there are some areas that you do not have to hold on to. So give responsibility in particular areas. And it's sad when we hear that the leader is responsible for almost every department within their business or in their congregation or churches, head of men, head of youth, head of departmental sections, rather than empowering and equipping people to take up these roles of responsibility where they are functioning and enables the department to function better and more efficiently, rather than you as a leader trying to hold on to these positions of power. And then how do we select people to whom we can delegate work? Selection is a critical issue. So they are known from their sphere of influence. So you have observed these people that you're investing time and effort to train. They have been recommended to you or to your organization for training. So already these are people that already has some sense of their leadership gifts and responsibilities. People who serve on a team. So team building and team leadership is critical for success in any group, any organization.
Yes.
So we are not out there just on our own, in our own heads, thinking how to solve every problem, but there is an emphasis on building a team around you. You're seeking trusted people among you, people of good reputation, people who have a track record, as it were, of being committed to what they said they are committed to, and they are not careless, or they have a sense of excellence about what they do. They're competent and intelligent, full of wisdom, the Bible talks about, and responsible people already. So there is already a framework of the kind of people that you want to choose among your leadership team. How do we develop others while we delegate the work? So we understand our own self, be familiar with the strengths we pass on to others in their work. Leaders do not have all the strengths and gifts that are necessary to accomplish our task and work, our ministry. Know the person you wish to develop. So you identify his or her strengths and weaknesses. So it's a selective process. It is not where we just, anyone who volunteers that we just is chosen, but it's a careful process of selection, and so that you're investing in the right people. Clearly define the assignment. Don't leave anything in question So write it down. So as we bring people on board with us, it should be clear, what is this assignment about? What are you responsible for? To whom are you responsible to? And who is responsible to you? If the assignment is blurred, if we are uncertain about what we are asked to do, there has to be a level of confusion and misunderstanding along the way. What do we plan to get out of this? Tell how you will grow from this experience, whether it's a short-term training, whether it's a 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years. What do you expect to get out of this training? And then we have to spend relational time with them. Just like Jesus did, he was always with these men. So they grew from this leader and the relationship they have experienced with him, and observed him as he led by example, and then hold them accountable for their work. So give them the freedom to fail as well, and debrief and affirm regularly. So we find place to do the debriefing, understanding where they're coming from, perhaps their challenges that they're facing, the responsibilities that they have, and how they're coping with the challenges that they face, and how you can further enable and equip them in accomplishing the task that you have assigned them to. So here's
we are discussing a topic on dedication. So if you have any questions and you want to send in any response to the information that you're hearing, please feel free to do so. You can send in your response on 403-1031, or you can send them on our YouTube platform since we're live. So continue, Reverend John.
Great. So we've talked about how you can select people that you believe that can be members of your team, your leadership team, and your followership. So here's a process that is observed. One, I do it while you watch. So I exemplify it before you, I model it, I role play it out before you. So you watch while the leader demonstrates it. Then we do it together. So you observe how it should be done. Then we build a team between us, and we work on what we want to accomplish together. And then you allow the person to do it that you're training, the trainee in this case, and then you watch how the trainee does it. So you observe how they do it, and then we evaluate together. And then you do it while others watch. So that's just a simple process of how the developmental process takes place. And then so you as a leader, we are talking here not only of addition but of multiplication. So that's a whole different process. So you as the leader, and then you're developing leaders. Leaders are selecting potential leaders, and potential leaders select other potential leaders, so that the structure, the organizational structure, continues to develop leaders in a consistent basis. Very often we stay at the second rung of leaders. So we have trained, we have selected some leaders, and if we continue the cycle of training other leaders, very often we have a gap in leadership succession. And so how do we monitor those we have trained, those we are training, to ensure that they particularly are training others? One of the responsibilities of this program that we did several years ago was that while we provided this training, the responsibility for graduation was that they had to find at least 2 persons that they would teach their lessons to on a weekly basis and bring back a report to the class, a group of students. So developing others while delegating work. There are several distinctions between a leader of leaders and leader of followers. And so one desire, the desire of the leader is that leaders will develop followers. Who develop followers need to be needed. So there's a sense of need even on the part of the leader who is just developing followers. But leaders who develop leaders wants to be succeeded. So that's a whole different perspective. When we develop leaders, we're saying, look, at some point I'll be out of this role, I'll be out of this position, and then so we are looking at succession of filling the gaps and making room so others can have greater access and responsibility. So there has to be a desire on the part of the one who is delegating work. And then, of course, focus. Leaders who develop followers focus on the weakness of people. Leaders who develop leaders focus on the strengths of people. So that's the huge difference there. If you're developing leaders, you want to identify the strengths of those that you're seeking to lead. So there's that particular focus in your leadership. And then priorities. Leaders who develop followers devote efforts to those who are most new. So they are new in their roles. The leaders who develop leaders devote efforts to those with the most potential. So leaders look for the potential and seek out the potential in leaders and accentuate and emphasize the strengths and the potential in leaders. And then fourthly, the abilities. Leaders who develop followers are good leaders. Leaders who develop leaders are great leaders. So you can evaluate yourself whether you're good, or whether you're great. There's a book out there, as a matter of fact, called Good to Great. It's a very popular book on leadership. So I hope everyone may have access or know about this particular book. Good to Great. A good read for anyone who is seeking to develop others as well. And then attitude. Leaders who develop followers lift up themselves. Leaders who develop leaders lift up others. So watch our attitudes. Is it to make us look good rather than to help others to fulfill their God-given responsibility? So watch our attitude. Gauge our motivation, and then time. How we focus on time. Leaders who develop followers spend time with people, and leaders who develop leaders invest time in people. You know, time could pass by because you're just allowing the time to go by rather than to intentionally use the time that you have to invest. So we can waste a lot of time with people rather than to use the time that we have with people to actually invest into their life, or as we'd say, to pour what we have and the resources into the lives of others. And so those are some of the key principles, how we develop others and understand the difference of how our attitude, our behavior is totally opposite when we are seeking to develop followers as against when we are seeking to develop lead. Expectation is another aspect of it. Leaders who develop followers ask for little commitment. Leaders who develop leaders ask for much commitment. So you're developing leaders, there's much expectation from those that you are seeking to invest in. So the expectation is different. When you're developing followers, there's very little that is expected of them. But for leaders, you have a higher expectation in terms of what you invest in their life. Then it comes down to leadership as well. Leaders who develop followers lead everyone the same way. Leaders who develop leaders lead everyone differently. So it is not a cut and dry. We do not have a particular pattern when we are training leaders.
Right.
Leaders come with different strengths and skills and abilities. They come with their mindsets. So we cannot lead a team of people, a team of leaders by a pre-cut plan, but rather to emphasize their abilities and strengths. And that does take more effort than if we have a sort of blanket way of training like we would do followers. And then impact. Leaders who develop followers impact this generation. Leaders who develop leaders impact the next generation.
Right.
So there is a futuristic thinking when we are seeking to develop the next generation.
Okay.
Yes?
So as you mentioned in a previous setting that leaders are not for the weak in heart. You got to be strong. You have to be discerning. You have to understand what the task is, and you have to understand we need help from someone else.
Absolutely. And then it is okay to ask someone to be a mentor to you. As a matter of fact, you could ask someone to be a mentor to you, and also as a leader, you can offer to be a mentor to someone that could influence and impact the next generation. So there's great responsibility, great opportunities, especially in these times as well. Although we are in a different time and circumstance of providing training and providing mentoring and leadership, yet there are doors that are available to us, virtual doors, we would say, are still available to us to provide and equipping and mentoring others that will impact the next generation. So we're seeking to multiply our leadership and influence globally, because that's where the platforms are. As you know, your program is aired now, and it's online. It is anybody from any part of the globe can tune into your broadcast, into your radio station, and so that provides opportunity to equip, to train, to delegate as well responsibilities for those who are listening. Some assessment for you. So here's some questions for assessment. Am I spending my time developing followers or leaders? How am I cultivating a leadership environment? So it's a question to assess your own self. How do you function? What is your focus? What is your desire? What are your priorities? What is your attitude, your expectation, and impact? So are you developing followers or leaders? And then an application question. Who am I developing at this time? Who can I begin to develop? And what is my plan for that person? So some personal questions for application. Who am I developing at this time? Who can I begin to develop? And what is my plan for that person? So that's some great responsibilities. Dale Galloway says, some leaders want to make followers. I want to make leaders. Not only do I want to make leaders, but leaders of leaders, and then leaders of leaders of leaders. So that's a challenge for us as we think about the times in which we live. And more than ever before, there are leadership gaps everywhere. We see that in governments, we see that in business, we see that in the church, we see that in communities. How do you fill those gaps? From a biblical perspective, the question is asked, the question and concern is now, how do you fill the gaps? Standing in the gap. and making yourself ready to function and to fill up the space that is vacant during this critical time. So you want to be a gap filler. You want to take responsibility to invest and develop at least one leader that will develop another and others. And as Dale Galloway says, developing leader of leaders of leaders. We have to start someplace.
Yeah.
And today's a great day to start. Think carefully about one person in your sphere of influence or in your company, in your organization that you want to identify carefully and prayerfully as well, and provide time, not just to spend, but to invest, provide resources, give them a book to read. Some of us have so many books that are not been read. Pull a couple and give it to somebody. Encourage them to read it, but ask them questions about the book. Don't just give them and they put it down on the shelf, but go back and ask, what did you read in chapter 1? What do you think about? And sometimes they don't answer you because they have not started. But you stick with them and encourage them and get them rolling, get them off their comfort pedals and get them moving. And I think that will take us to a place of leadership that is so critical in this time. The world is in crisis for leadership. We hear it on the global platforms. The world leaders discussing how to save the world in terms of the environment and climate change. And very often they don't have a clue. We are people of faith, understand what God is doing in the world. And so our perspective is helpful as well. But also we have practical responsibilities as changed leaders to protect and save the environment from further chaos and decline and pollution. That's one of the first commands that we were given in the book of Genesis. Take care of the earth.
Yes.
To rule over the fish of the sea and the air and the land and to cultivate and to produce. And very often we have not done a very good job with that. So I think it's also a call to good leaders to accentuate and emphasize the importance of how, as Christian leaders, we do our part in preventing pollution. How do we take care of garbage disposal? How do we take care of all the plastics, that has been scattered over these smaller islands? Of course, bigger countries of the world as well. So it has to be a proactive response, not only to what we consider spiritual, but that is all spiritual. All work is sacred. And we come to that perspective that there's really not secular and sacred, but we all call upon to contribute to the mandate given from the very beginning and inception of this world.
Yes. You made mention of Dale Galloway's speech that some leaders want to make followers and he wants to make leaders. Do you have any points that you can shed further light on if a leader is making followers or he's making leaders? Could you shed some more light on that and how you can correct your decisions to ensure that you are making leaders?
Right. So apparently there are some areas of weakness when a leader focuses on just developing followers. Followers need to be developed as well, but it seems as though there's some negative areas in our own lives because it's much easier to train followers because basically they just do what you say. They do not challenge you. They do not investigate if you say it is correct. Where do you get your information from? So followers basically just go along. And so it takes a lot more effort to train the leaders. Like we said, Sometimes there's in the part of the leader who is just training followers, they have their own need to be needed. They focus on the weakness of people. Um, they lift up themselves and they just spend time with you rather than invest time with you. They have little expectations. They tend to treat everybody the same, and they think only of now rather than the next generation. So there's um, there's a total difference and differentiation between the one who is committed to training of leaders. How we change that mindset has to be an understanding, like Dale Galloway said, that his goal, his vision, his passion for life is to train these leaders. And like Jesus did,
Mhm.
I'm sure there were thousands, hundreds of thousands of people perhaps, um, but he looked out for these select people and invested his whole life in them.
Mhm.
That's what he did for his 3 years in public ministry until his death, burial, resurrection, and ascension. So, who is it that you're going to invest that time in? When you're going to start? Set a timetable. If we don't put it on the calendar, if we don't plan it, it never happens. There's always a sometime down the road. It's procrastination, which does not really get us anywhere, but rather a decisive plan in how you begin this process
Mhm.
of delegating. Um, and like we started in our discussion, that you're delegating tasks and developing people. That has to be the focus of our lives
Mhm.
and challenge us in these times when, although we may not have the time and the space to meet physically
Right.
and face to face,
Mhm.
yet the opportunities to meet like this and to communicate these principles that enables planning, succession, and multiplication of
Mhm.
your life and work.
So they must be planning, you know. I was looking at a program not too long ago about, I think it's Serena and Venus Williams, their dad. He had an 85-page document of a plan of how, he's going to get his girls to be the top
Uh,
stars. So you see, it's very important. And that plan actually came to fruition. They're the top tennis players in the world. And we see Jesus spent 3 years training his disciples intensively before he really sent them out. So again, planning and training is very important in, training leaders. And in 3 years, a lot was done by Jesus. A lot was accomplished, a lot was taught, and we see the result of it even now, 2,000 years plus after we're feeling the impact of what Jesus did. So it must be, as you said, it's not for the weak in heart. It must have taken Jesus, a good effort to get all of that
yes,
done.
of course.
All right. So do you have any closing remarks before we close off today?
Great. So I would encourage you to our listeners, viewers, to look at where you are in your own leadership development cycle. Um, and if you have been, procrastinating, complaining about lack of resources, and you do not have the time to concentrate on your own personal growth, um, to encourage you to develop a more proactive, positive mindset toward your own personal growth. No one is actually going to take that responsibility for you. Um, you have responsibility for your personal growth and personal development. Take advantage. There's so many opportunities now. We hear of the scholarships being offered in different places for young people and adults as well to further their formal education. But there are other workshops, seminars that are now available online that we could access. So I want to encourage you to do a search of where you want to go, identify what you want to accomplish within the next 3 months or so, and lay out a plan and put the plan to work. So I want to encourage you not to just try to escape and excuse yourself because we're going through a pandemic. As a matter of fact, what we have observed is that a number of us are using this lockdown time to go back to school, online. Otherwise, we'd be busy running all over the place in activity and stuff, important as they were and continue to be. And so it's almost 2 years now. And so I believe we have more time available for those kinds of learning experiences. So it's never too late to start, and pick up from where you left off, and let's get the ball rolling.
That's right. That's right. Very well said. Well said. As Reverend King would have put it some years ago, keep the main business, and the main business is the kingdom. And as leaders are trained, we will see the gospel go forth. And the word of God says the Lord will build his church and the gates of hell will not prevail. So we thank God for the system that he has put in place, that leaders will be built and that his work will continue. More and more, you have to appreciate the wisdom of God in all that he does. I really thank you again, Reverend John, for all that you would have shared with us today. We have some listeners who have said, we have Nordica Sinclair, she's saying great insight on the differences between leader and minister. She appreciated that piece of explanation. And I'm sure it's a representation of other listeners who are as well appreciative of what you are sharing with us. So these listeners, this is our session today of Leadership Plus, and we are glad that you took time to join us today. And I pray that you find space in your life to apply this wonderful information that can change and change the trajectory of many generations. So again, Reverend John, we thank you, and we ask the listeners to continue to stay locked on to Hope 103.1 FM. See you next Wednesday, God's will.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you very much. God bless.
All I require for life, God has given me, and I know who I am. We are a chosen generation.